I'd like to call the Tuesday, February 4th, 2020 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Ms. Brown, would you please take the roll?
Sunday. Here. Mumgard. Here. Gaines. Here. Glover. Here. Jaworski. Here. Klug. Stubbe. Here. Ingberg. Here.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
We do.
And a current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the council chambers. Ms. Myers, Administrator's Report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick things. First of all, we're looking for some volunteers for the Valentine's Day 55 Plus Club Lunch. This year it's going to be held, again, jointly with La Vista, but it'll be held at the Papillion Landing. So the luncheon is Friday, February 14th. So if any of the elected officials would like to help serve, please let Kendra know and we'll send you the details. Also, Amber, Jeff, and I met with Tim Weander with the NDOT regarding the relinquishment of 84th Street. You know, I've updated you before that we've been visiting with them, looking for a plan. They're pretty anxious to reach an agreement with us. They're hoping to do that by July of 2020. Again, good news is that we've got some progress or made some headway relative to the cost that would be associated with the bridge replacement, so I think that's good news. So the ball's kind of in their court. They've got a couple questions to answer for us, and I would expect that we'll be meeting back with them probably in the next 30 to 60 days. Lastly, place on your calendars Friday, March 13th for the grand opening for Papillion Landing. We'll have festivities all day long, open to the public, as well as some formal presentations, etc. We don't have all of the details set yet, but we'll keep you posted on that, but at least wanted you to have a placeholder on your calendar. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Ingberg. Second by Councilman Gaines.
Mayor, I'd like to poll C3.
C3 is polled. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote on everything except C3.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. C3 was pulled because you've got a memo at your table. There's an amendment to the claims to add one more that was late coming in from Sampson Construction that we want to get into this round. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200024? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilman Stubbe. Is there a motion to amend to include an additional $1,176,752 payable to Sampson Construction? Motion by Councilman Glover, second by Councilman Jaworski. Do you have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion on the motion to amend? Please vote on the motion to amend.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion's amended. Any council discussion? Please vote on the motion as amended.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item D1, Ordinance 1867, an ordinance to amend Section 20511 of Article 2, Development Definitions, Section 20518 of Article 2, Use Types, and Table 20538 of Article 4, Zoning District Regulations, all of Chapter 205, the Papillion Municipal Code, having to do with alternate energy production services, solar energy systems, and utilities. The applicant's the City of Papillion. The Solar Energy Zoning Amendment. Is there a council member that will introduce? Introduced by Councilman Stubbe. Thank you. Item D2, an ordinance to approve an amendment to the 2019-2020 fiscal budget. Is there a council member that will introduce? Introduced by Councilman Jaworski. D3, Ordinance 1869, an ordinance to amend Papillion Municipal Code 4613 entitled Rules of Conduct regarding motions and voting in council meetings. Introduced by Councilman Tom Mumgard. Introduced. Thank you. Item E1, Ordinance 1861, an ordinance to amend Section 205 through 279 of Article 39, non-conforming development of Chapter 205, the Papillion Municipal Code, having to do with non-conforming uses. This is a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Close the public hearing. Item E2, Ordinance 1866, an ordinance to amend Chapter 81 of the Papillion Municipal Code entitled Alcoholic Beverages by adding new sections numbered 8121 through 8130 regarding entertainment districts. Again, a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll note for the record that we did get, there's a testimony at your desk from Project Extra Mile in regards to Ordinance 1866. We'll have that entered into the record. We'll close the public hearing. Item F1, Resolution R200023, a resolution to approve the appointment of Amber Powers as City Administrator. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200023? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents besides Ms. Powers? Do we have any opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Congratulations and thank you for that. Just because we've got some students here and also this is televised, Ms. Myers has announced her retirement effective July. And so Ms. Powers was hired 3 years ago with the purposeful idea of bringing her on as the assistant city administrator, knowing that retirement was coming, and then we can kind of have a 3-year job interview, and she passed it, so now we appointed her to replace Ms. Myers, and that'll be effective upon Ms. Myers' retirement. So we'll do the oath of office in July. And a related item, F2, Resolution R200025, a resolution to approve the appointment of Philip Green as Deputy City Administrator. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200025? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilman Jaworski. Any proponents? Mr. Green is here. Do you want to come up and share a little bit? A lot of people probably don't know you.
Thank you, Mayor Black.
Welcome.
Greatly appreciate the honor to be appointed to this position. Welcome, council members. My name is Phil Green. It's been my privilege for the last 15 years to be the Assistant City Administrator up in Blair, Nebraska. During that time, my role has primarily focused on overseeing the building department, planning and zoning, but I came with about 15 years of management experience. I also have IT in my background, and so fairly quickly got involved in overseeing all of our IT activities. We hadn't had a HR manager until just this last year, so I participated a lot in HR. And as with typical for a smaller community, you end up wearing lots of different hats and doing lots of different things. Again, I've been with the City of Blair for 15 years. I actually started 15 years ago as a 43-year-old intern, which is a little unusual for an intern, I suppose. But this is a second career for me. I spent 15 years in full-time ministry as a pastor. But that gave me some great opportunities to learn people skills, and I have always been fascinated by local government and communities and cities. And so over the years, I finished up my master's in public administration from the University of Nebraska, graduated in 2006. I've always been involved with UNO since then. In 2007, they started what's called the Certified Public Manager Program, asked me to sit on their advisory board. So I've been on the advisory board for that for the last 13 years, actually taught one of the courses on managing in the public sector for the first 10 years of that program. In the past, I've been president of the Nebraska City County Management Association. City of Blair sponsored me through a leadership development program that the International City County Management Organization hosts, which is called Leadership ICMA. Graduated from that in 2010. I currently serve as what's called the local government mentor for the UNO ICMA student chapter. So mentoring and being involved with students has always been something very, very important to me. I guess the last two things I'd like to share is, number one, ever since I got into local government, I've been fascinated by the similarities that exist between how governments function and how churches function. Organization structures are kind of the same. There's a board, there's a full-time staff that's there to help serve the constituents. As we all know, churches are full of saints and sinners, and so is local government. And then lastly, I was born in Lincoln, grew up mostly in the Omaha metro area. We lived in multiple places, mostly north though, from Center Street up to the northern county border. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know Sarpy County. I'm looking forward to getting to know Papillion, and I have to say, so far, it feels like home. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Call for council discussion. I just want to fill in a couple of other things that I knew from the resume that impressed me when we were talking to Phil. I think he spent some time as the information director and IT director there. Also overseeing the library, I believe, which is important. Been involved in the Economic Development Corporation. They're if you remember our whole Greater Omaha partnership and the role Sarpy plays, Washington County is part of that same partnership. So he's bringing all the relationships that we already leverage for economic development. Served in emergency management and safety director, and I think on that even maybe led the recovery team for one of the floods up there. So again, city-county relationships and emergency management. And I think you also had been involved in the Nebraska Planning and Zoning Association as well. So, and former military, so veteran as well. Any council discussion? If not, please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. You want to take the oath of office? I'll meet you at the podium. And if people have not heard the oath of office for Nebraska, it's really long, but it is set out in state legislature. So I state your name.
I, Philip Green,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same,
and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
and without mental reservation
and without mental reservation
or for purpose of evasion,
or for purpose of evasion,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties
perform the duties
of the office of Deputy City Administrator
of the office of Deputy City Administrator
according to law
according to law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my abilities.
And I do further swear
And I do further swear
that I do not advocate
that I do not advocate
or am a member of
or am a member of
any political party
any political party
or organization
or organization
that advocates the overthrow
that advocates the overthrow
of the government of the United States
of the government of the United States
or of this state
or of this state
by force or violence,
by force or violence,
and that during such time
and that during such time
as I am in this position,
as I am in this position,
I will not
I will not
advocate
advocate
nor become a member of
nor become a member of
any political party
any political party
or organization
or organization
that advocates the overthrow
that advocates the overthrow
of the government of the United States
of the government of the United States
or of this state
or of this state
by force or violence.
by force or violence,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thanks, sir.
Effective now, to be fair to Blair, I think you're giving him another month's notice, so 1st of March.
1st of March,
yeah. Be here. Do you want to introduce your wife as well?
Oh, yes. I was told to do that. I am sorry. Yes, this is my wife, Karen Green, and again, I deeply appreciate her support and encouragement over these many, many years, especially with this being a second career. Worked at the airport, worked the early shift, so went to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, worked until noon, studied for several hours, went to school at night. She really handled the job of being a great mother and father for several years, and honey, I love you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome to Papillion. Next is item F3. And again, just a quick explanation on this one because it's only once a year and it's a little unusual. This is fireworks permits. The way our ordinance works, we grant 10 permits. There's a whole hierarchy of who they get granted to if we get more than 10 applications, and we did get more than 10 applications this year. And so we'll take a motion. I will, if it's okay with the council, we'll do one motion for everything. So when we take the motion, I'll read off what the 9 are, and then we'll have a motion to amend, and we'll need to insert of the remaining 2, which one gets inserted. Excuse me. So item F3, resolution R200016, a resolution to approve applications for the 2020 summer fireworks season, June 25th to July 4th. And the 9 that are included in that by right of the policy. American Legion Post 32, it's a not-for-profit, has held a permit for 14 years consecutively. Bellino Fireworks, for-profit, 23 years. Echo Softball, nonprofit, 20 years. Papillion La Vista Spirit Football, nonprofit, 14 years. Papillion La Vista Optimist Club, nonprofit, 17 years. Sarpy County Swim Club, nonprofit, 20 years. St. Columbia Hill Shepherds, nonprofit, 23 years. Standard Fireworks, for-profit, 23 years. Tangier Shrine Center, nonprofit, 18 years. Again, just for the public, the importance of the nonprofit and the number of years goes straight to the policy. If somebody's held a permit more than 5 years, they're grandfathered if they apply again the next year. So those are the 9 that are in the motion. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200016?
Motion to approve Resolution R200016, with the additional 10th.
We'll take the amendment as soon as we get a second. Second. So a motion by Mumgarde, second by Ingberg for the first 9. So then is there a motion to amend to issue the 10th permit to?
I will make a motion.
Just for public purposes, let me mention who they are. The next 2 that we received is Wellspring Church. They're not for profit. They have held a permit for 3 years consecutively. And then the Fraternal Order of Eagles is also a not-for-profit, and it's their first year of application. Mr. Mumgarde.
I'll make a motion to amend the resolution to add as the 10th fireworks permit the Fraternal Order of Eagles.
Is there a second? Second by Councilman Glover.
Can we just put all 11 in?
Policy, the council policy in resolution only allows 10. We'd actually have to change the city ordinances to allow 11.
Can I?
Make a motion that we add Wellspring instead.
We have procedurally, we have an amendment on the floor and with a second. So we'll go ahead and vote on that one. If it fails, then we'll be open to amend again.
Discuss first before
Yeah,
we vote.
I still have, can I explain my amendment?
Yeah, because we've got a second. So council discussion.
Okay, let me explain. As was mentioned, our ordinance says that if you've received a fireworks permit for 5 consecutive years, your grandfather did. And we have 9 applicants that have met that. So they're automatically in. We also have the ordinance that says we can only issue 10. So we have 1 open spot. And we have to decide what do we do with that open spot. Well, currently, Wellspring has had it for 3 years. Now, I don't have anything against Wellspring selling fireworks. That's fine. But I know, I can see just by counting the years, if we give it to Wellspring 2 more years, this year and next year, we will have filled up and given a monopoly to those 10 items, to those 2 organizations. And any other worthwhile organizations that want to sell fireworks will be cut out and will not be able to sell fireworks in Papillion. So I would propose we stop right now. And since we have not had anybody request an amendment of the ordinance, we've had plenty of time. I mentioned it several times back in October. We've had nobody seek to amend the ordinance to add additional numbers, that we now have to do something with that 10th item. And I say we draw the line right now. And we say, well, that 10th spot is going to go to a new organization. That would be the Fraternal Order of Eagles. And Wellspring just is going to have to wait out a year, because that's the way that our ordinance is forcing us to work. And if by next year we have an amendment of the ordinance to increase the numbers, which has been a matter of discussion off and on for years, then fine. Wellspring and the Eagles, if they both want it, they can get it. But today, I'm looking at it that 10th spot needs to be a rotating spot so that we don't inadvertently or purposefully get into a position where we have monopolized the fireworks in Papillion to 10 organizations that have had it for 5 years. That's why I'm saying, okay, right now we start taking turns on that 10th spot, and I think we should take the turn as that's the new guy, not the Wellspring. That's why I've made that amendment.
We've got a couple of people in discussion. Once the discussion's done, I'm going to roll back to Robert's Rule of Order based on the comment Mr. Sunday made to bring everything back together. Mr. Gaines.
Okay, so it's my understanding that both Wellspring Church and the Fraternal Order of Eagles are going to be working with the same vendor. I spoke with the member of the vendors organization today, which is Bellino Fireworks, and they are requesting that Wellspring continues to get their license this season. And I understand what Councilman Mumgard is saying, and I agree to a point, but I think that puts us at 4 years, and then moving forward, we need to, if somebody wants to change it, then they can contact the council member, we can change it. But I'm going to vote against the amendment for the Fraternal Order of Eagles this year. If they were at 4 years and we're going over to 5, it might be a different discussion. But it's my understanding that the person that's working with both of these organizations is requesting to keep the person that they currently are working with.
Mr. Jaworski.
Yeah, and I kind of probably maybe dropped the ball on this. When I seen this, I just thought we'd add the one without changing the amendment. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It is, and I think we do need to change it. And I think if we stay with Wellsprings, I'm going to vote for Wellsprings myself, because even if they got 3 years, they still got another year before they're in there for good. So I don't think it's fair to those guys that have been doing it for 3 years to give it to somebody that's coming in for the first year. And I think next year we're going to have to work on upping this to maybe even 12 people. I've brought that up before, and it's never really went anywhere. Maybe now that there's more people getting involved, because we've always had 10 people. We've never had 11. I would like to see this go to 12, to be honest. So I'm going to keep Wellsprings in there for this year, so thanks.
Mr. Sunday, you're next, but I also want to answer the question that you started to raise. Procedurally, I think there's 2 ways to proceed, and I want to check it with the city attorney. So what we have right now is a motion to amend to grant the 10th application to the Fraternal Order of Eagles. That's the motion to amend that's on the floor, so that's what the discussion's for. 2 ways we can proceed based on what you said, Mr. Sunday. 1, we could leave that motion to amend on the floor. We could vote on that up or down. If it passes, then the motion is amended and we move on. If it fails, then you can make another motion to amend and put in Wellspring. That's one way to proceed. The other is Robert's rule, I believe, would allow a substitute motion to be made at this point to substitute Wellspring in. So just because you raised the question, I just wanted to lay out there are 2 paths, but you are next in the queue for discussion.
Thank you. I support Wellspring, again, much like Mr. Jaworski, because they've been there 3 years. They have the experience in terms of just from a point of view, they're more experienced in handling the fireworks. If you really want to bring the Fraternal Order of Eagles in, I'm not opposed to that. And I'm not opposed to an 11th permit. But I just don't see the fairness in just kicking Wellspring off just because you're afraid they're going to get some, heightened status down the road. To me, it's not fair dealing, and I don't support that kind of thinking. So,
Thank you, Mr. Ingberg.
Councilman Mumgard makes a good point in many ways. However, there's always a however. I would support Wellsprings for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think we have to bear in mind with these nonprofits especially, that usually, my understanding, usually is their biggest fundraiser of the year. And if I'm Wellspring and for 3 years, that's my biggest fundraiser, and now we cut them off at the knees, so to speak, I think that's a little unfair to them. And second of all, I think despite the logic of Councilman Mumgard's argument, by allowing them another year, it also kind of fits in with the philosophy we've had to this time, which is those that have had experience and have been participants before, if they're in the top 10, if we get 10, let's say, they continue forward. And that's much the place Wellspring's in now. Also, I think there's going to come a time when Maybe not some of the nonprofits will drop out because they're good fundraisers for them, but we may find some for-profit that are going to over time drop out as well. So because people that run some of the for-profit are starting to get older and may not be interested in participating anymore. But for those reasons, I'm gonna if amendments made to use Wellspring, I'm gonna support it. Fraternal Order of Eagles, I wish we could do that as well, but right now the ordinance doesn't allow it.
Mr. Gaines.
I'm going to make a substitute motion to make Wellspring Church the 10th that we approve.
Is there a second? Second by Councilman Sunday. Council discussion on the substitute motion. Mr. Stubbe.
Yeah, I just have a question with regard. I've heard that the 10 is policy, and I've also heard that it's ordinance. So is it a policy?
It's ordinance.
It is an ordinance.
So we'd actually have to make an ordinance change to increase it to 11.
But require 3 readings in order for us to go through that effort.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
And that's kind of what I was just going to touch on too. We can change this ordinance next council meeting and still give these fraternal order time to get in for the fireworks, I believe, right? Because we're starting this fairly early.
Well, it'd be 3 readings, so you couldn't do it by next council meeting unless there was a suspension of the rules and waiver of second and third.
We're good at that.
Oh, and state law does dictate when they have to be approved. They do have to be approved at tonight's meeting. So the change would be for next year.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mumgard.
Well, okay, now, I'm going to vote against the substitute motion. But as I've said, I don't have any problem with Wellspring getting the license. What I have a problem with is the effect of our ordinance. And if somebody's going to come forward in the future with a new ordinance, an amendment of our overall ordinance to increase the number, at that time I will also be pitching that we need to do away with the 5-year the guaranteed after 5 years. I no longer see the purpose of that. I was here when we adopted that ordinance, and it had a purpose. But I think what we're doing with it now is having the license have value independent of whether they do the work or not. I'm hearing stories of some nonprofit organizations that have to partner with a licensee because we don't have any spots to let a new person in. And then that licensee doesn't do anything. All that they do is get the license. And then they hire another organization to do the work. Well, I don't think that's the goal that we're having here, is to make the license in and of itself have value. But that's what happens when we have that grandfather clause, so to speak, that once you've made 5 years, you get it forever.
I think
Whether you want to do the work or not, you get it forever.
I think the discussion is starting to move towards what the future ordinance is going to be and away from the motion to amend.
I understand, and
Okay.
I won't go any further, but I'm just telling you that, okay, you've all made good points. But next year, the rubber hits the road. We got to make a decision on it if we have not changed the ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Sunday.
If we're going to, well, I would just make the point that Mr. Mumgard's been on this council for, I think, 25, 28 years, somewhere in there. And I don't see the point of, he was, part of making this the rules. I certainly wasn't. But now, because he doesn't want Wellspring to get some status, he wants to change the rules at the 11th hour. It's very much unfair.
Well, the motion on the floor is not changing the rules. That's the future discussion.
Right, and I would just also add, if you want to help out nonprofits, if you want to remove somebody, remove the for-profit people from this list, not a nonprofit organization like Wellspring Church, who, as Mr. Jaworski rightly pointed out, is probably really relying on this income this year in their budgetary planning. That would be very unfair for this council to pull on them at the last minute.
Thank you. Any other council discussion? If not, vote on the substitute motion to add Wellspring in the amendment.
6 yeas, 1 nay by Mumgarde.
Motion passes. The original motion is amended now to include Wellspring as the 10th. Any further council discussion? I didn't call earlier, any proponents? Any opponents? Please vote on the motion as amended.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is item F4, Resolution R200017, a resolution to approve a license agreement with Harry Bossert, American Legion Post 32, 230 West Lincoln Street, Papillion, Nebraska, regarding the Legion's proposed temporary and limited use of an adjacent small parcel of city property. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200017? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. I think we got some students in the audience tonight. You're going to get get to see me be tested on Robert's Rules of Order. It already started on the last one, and now it's going to go into the next one. Again, just a little bit for public education and a little bit for the students here. We had an agenda item, I think it was 2 city council meetings ago, that was not approved. And we did not have there were a couple of council members missing. With Robert's Rule of Order, if there is a motion made, there is a short period of time where that motion can be reconsidered. And to be reconsidered, the motion to reconsider can only be brought by somebody that was on the prevailing side or somebody that was absent. And if that motion passes, it basically undoes the previous vote, and then we bring it back onto the floor, we discuss it again, and we take a new vote. So it's kind of like a redo. But we've got one tonight. We had a council member that did formally ask for a motion to reconsider. So item F5, Resolution R200018. This is a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a motion to reconsider Resolution number R200003, consent to the resettlement of refugees within the city of Papillion pursuant to the Presidential Executive Order number 13888, introduced by Councilman Mumgarde. This is a public hearing. Are there any proponents? And this is proponents that want to speak in favor of the motion to reconsider.
I haven't made the
Oh,
motion.
we need the motion of the second. I'm sorry. Motion.
I would make a motion to approve R20-0018, the resolution regarding resettlement of refugees.
Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Ingberg. Got to think of my order. Yes.
Don't we have to have a full council here to have this vote?
Yes.
And we don't have a full council?
We do not. Then that's good education. So for a motion to reconsider, it takes a vote of the full council according to the city's policy, bylaws, order of conduct, I believe. It does take 8, and we only have 7. Mr. Mumgarde.
I will make a substitute motion. I will make a motion to suspend the rule in section 46-13K5, requiring all members to be present when a motion to reconsider is voted on.
So for the behalf of the students and people listening, and make sure the council's all following, and to test my understanding, look to the city attorney to confirm, Robert's Rule of Order has something called a motion to suspend the rules, which basically said if there's a specific rule that says you have to do something, you can suspend that rule. And I believe that takes a vote, it takes a majority vote to do that. Is that correct? Okay. So if I understand it right, the motion to suspend the rule of conduct, you referenced 4613K5, and that is the specific rule that says all council members have to be present. So that motion's on the floor. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Ingberg. Suspensions of rules, those are not debatable motions, are they? No. They are not debatable, so please vote. An affirmative vote will waive the rule that there has to be 8 council members. A no vote will not waive that requirement.
5 yeas, 2 nays by Sunday and Gaines.
That motion passes. So we have the motion to reconsider on the floor. The waiver of all 8 has been suspended.
Okay, I will now make a motion to suspend the rule in section 46-13K1, requiring a 2/3 majority vote to hear a motion to reconsider made at other than the next succeeding council meeting.
So the motion to suspend is 4613K1, the last sentence, and the last sentence requires a 2/3 affirmative vote to approve a motion to reconsider. So that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. So second by Jaworski.
Point of order, Mayor?
Yes.
He's attempting to get around a 2/3 requirement by a simple majority vote. I don't believe that's permissible, is it, Alan?
I'll look to the, we got a point of order. It's not a debatable motion, but I believe the point of order is appropriate. I'll look to the city attorney to rule on that.
Yes, our rules of conduct do say that a motion to suspend is passable on 5 affirmative votes. So that's the way the rules read.
So the rule has no meat behind it then. If we can just get around it with a simple majority, then why even have the rule?
If you go through with a motion to suspend that rule, yes.
Right. Okay, well, I'm just going back to what I said a moment ago, you know.
It's not a debatable motion, but the
Okay,
I want to make sure though, because a point of order was raised. So the question was, can the rule be suspended, requiring 2/3? I believe the ruling was yes, it can.
Yes, it can.
Okay. Please vote.
Five yeas, 2 nays by Sunday and Gaines.
So we have the motion on the floor. We've had the suspension of the full council. We've had the suspension of the 2/3. Following through in my logic of where we ended up. So we are on the motion. No, we need to take the vote. We need to take the vote on the motion to reconsider.
Which is a simple majority.
Motion to reconsider? Okay. City clerk does say we have to have a public hearing on the motion to reconsider. And so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. The public hearing will call for proponents and opponents. This is specific on the motion to reconsider. I'll call for proponents. Those would be the ones that would want to support the motion to reconsider. Do we have any proponents? Do we have any opponents? Yes. And if you come up, if you'd state your name for the record.
My name's Lorraine Renante. I am opposed to resettling refugees in the city of Papillion, not to mention in the state of Nebraska. So the Refugee Settlement Act of 1980 has largely been held in secret for over 30 years. It has only been recently that we are now learning about the basic elements. The program runs jointly with the United States State Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Homeland Security. Congress gave up their role to the United Nations High Commission Commissioner for Refugees, which now decide where refugees come from, meaning which country they come from, and where they go. They get to decide what state they get to go to. There are 9 federal contractors that monopolize federal grants and contracts for placing refugees in over 180 cities across the United States. There are also 350 plus subcontractors working for those top 9 contractors. The top 9 contractors are Church World Service, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, the Episcopal Migration Ministries. Officially, they are the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society of the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, International Rescue Community, the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the World Relief Corporation. Mostly those 9 contractors receive federal grant money and are listed as nonprofit private businesses, which are also referred to as VOLOGs, VOLAG stands for Voluntary Agent or Voluntary Resettlement Agency. According to the United States Department, the fiscal year 2020 Notice of Funding Opportunity for Reception and Placement Program, the 9 contractors receive $2,175 per refugee. That is quite an incentive to bring those refugees here to the United States. Money flows to them and the subcontractors for everything from marriage training programs, interpreters, loans for startup companies, and so on. The top 9 contractors keep at least 45% up to 97% of the $2,175 for their nonprofit business. Information can be found on a federal Form 990. Some of those 9 contractors do not provide a Form 990, so we cannot be certain as to what and where those funds are reported. Once the refugee is resettled, then the local and state communities are responsible to help them survive. Many refugees are brought to cities for meatpacking plant jobs, which in this country used to be a very viable job for Americans. But big meat and big poultry has changed that both nationally and internationally. Sadly, the refugee is exploited and the taxpayer is on the hook. So what would a refugee bring to the city of Papillion? Why? What businesses or other incentives would be able to, or why would they help bring them here? In other words, what's in it for them? So we as a community need to stand up and not be pressured by special interest groups. If we are going to resettle people, we should resettle people already here in our community that need help and want our help.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other opponents?
Excuse me, I have a
Yes,
question.
Mr. Mumgarden.
Ms. Renate.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to debate with you whether we should approve that resolution of resettlement or not, because that's not what we're on right now. We're just talking about the reconsideration. And I have a couple of questions. I didn't get to vote on that resolution because I was absent, along with Councilmember Klug. And so it only got 4 positive votes, 2 votes against it. Because it needed a majority of 5, those 2 negative votes are seen to express the view of Papillion. Now that's 25% of the entire council. Why should we not go back and vote on this again? Instead, are you in favor of allowing the policy or the position of Papillion to be decided by 2 council members, 25% of the entire council?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
Well, I just want to go back and vote on it again, up or down. And those 2 council members can vote against it again. But if we don't get to that point, then we have not consented to relocating refugees. And that decision was made by only 25% of the elected officials who sit on this council. And I look at that and I think, well, that leaves me and all of my constituents out of the picture. It leaves 75% of the citizens of Papillion out of the picture. So if we're going to make the decision, we ought to at least make the decision with the majority of the people who represent the majority of the citizens. That's all I'm asking for. Is let's just go back and reconsider and re-vote on this so that we can have that end result.
I think I see where you're going. I'm going to not comment on that.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Public hearing is still open. Do we have any other opponents? I'll close the public hearing. So we have a motion. What's that? Oh, yeah. If you could come up to the podium and state your name for the record. And if you could pull the microphone down just a little bit.
Certainly.
Thank you.
My name is Rebecca Stock. I am not here originally for this purpose, but I did see that it was on the docket. It really is something we should reconsider, and financial reasons is not a reason to not accept refugees. That being said, it needs to be reconsidered.
So just for the record, because I had called for proponents and then opponents, you are a proponent.
I am a proponent.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we had the record clear.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. So we have a motion.
We have
Oh.
discussion for the council?
We have a motion and we have a second. So we'll have council discussion on the motion to reconsider. Mr. Sunday.
I think Ms. Renante brought up very good points. United Nations is deciding where people go, not anybody from this country. The vetting process is still, nobody satisfied me that we have a satisfactory vetting process to ensure security here for our citizens.
Just real quick, because I know we've got a couple other people in the queue. I just want to make sure we stay on topic. We've got, because we've got 2 items on the agenda. And sorry for cutting you off. I just want to make sure we get the comments in the right spot.
Okay, I'll speak just to the fairness of
the motion to reconsider.
The motion to reconsider.
Correct. Thank you.
I'll go to that then, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gaines, I was sitting right here. Mr. Gaines at the last meeting when this motion failed, invited anybody here that was here to table the issue so that everybody could be a part of the decision. I'm sure we all remember that. Well, exactly. Who should have? Well, I didn't say I wanted to table. I wanted.
Point of order.
You don't need to shout.
Point of order. Mr. Sunday has the floor.
I do, and I want to make a point. Everybody here, and you know this is true, was invited to table the matter, but you thought you had the upper hand, so you chose not to. Mr. Gaines, out of fairness, invited you to do that, and nobody took the opportunity to do that. And so we had the vote. Apparently nobody realized that it needed more than 4 votes. It needed 5. Mr. Gaines and I were aware that it needed 5, and that's why, out of fairness, Mr. Gaines made that option open to everybody. So it's not like anybody was treated unfairly here. Mr. Mumgard made the decision, as did Ms. Klug, for whatever reasons, not to be here that night. They knew it was on the agenda. So I oppose this, and I oppose the motion.
Mr. Gaines. Mr. Sunday, could you turn your microphone off? Thank you. Mr. Gaines.
Well, as we sit on this council, we talk frequently about, changing rules as we go, okay? I have a big problem with having a vote on something that I know that other council members were aware of. In 2013, there was a resolution or an ordinance, I can't recall exactly, that I voted against, and a council member, and I'm not going to call them out, approached me and asked me, hey, would you do a motion to reconsider? Here are the rules, and they spelled out these rules to me specifically. So I know that this council knows what the rules are, and if they didn't like the rules, similar to what we're talking about on fireworks just a few minutes ago, if they didn't like the rules, they should have changed the rules then. We had a vote, this motion failed, we move on. That's my opinion. I'm going to vote against the motion to reconsider, and if it passes, which I think is an injustice to the people to change the rules in the middle of the game, if it passes, I'll vote against the resolution to allow direct placement of refugees in the city.
Mr. Ingberg.
Look, just in respect to just this matter, which is the reconsideration, I will tell you in my 28 years on the council, it's very rare. It's not that we use it I don't like the implication that it's, when somebody says we're always changing rules. No, we don't. We rarely have ever used reconsideration, but the last time that I recall we used it had to do with a development situation, and it was kind of similar in the sense that there was a very minor amount of council people that made a decision for the entire community, but there was very little representation by the people that were present that night. Look, we all occasionally have to miss for whatever reason, illness or a family emergency, whatever the case may be. And I hate to see us get to the point where it's a problem. Everybody on this council has missed at one time or another, and that's pretty rare also. So in this particular matter, I'm going to vote to reconsider because I do think it's important that we get as many people here as we can to reconsider something if a small amount of council people make a decision for the entire community. Second of all, I don't know which way the vote's going to go, and I will tell you, the night we did vote on this, when it was a 4-2 vote, I will tell you without any hesitation that I know of no conversation between council people to decide how they were going to vote. This council, I've always been proud of the fact that we rarely discuss voting before we actually vote. We may ask each other questions or clarify or say, hey, you got a suggestion. But we don't sit around behind the week prior to council meetings and say, hey, how are we going to vote on this? And will we have a majority? Because honestly, until we got here that night, I didn't know it. We rarely know when somebody's going to miss until we get here. So that vote wasn't taken with the idea that that there wasn't enough. And you're correct in saying that I think there was some misunderstanding about whether it requires 4 or 5 to pass it. But I didn't cast a vote based on that. I cast a vote on what I thought was an appropriate decision. And I'll talk about that later. But consideration-wise, I am going to vote to support it because it's a rare situation. But I think it's important that more than the group that was here that night at least make a decision one way or the other, yes or no.
Mr. Mumgard.
Okay, I just wanted to address whether we're following the rules. And I'll say that any suggestion that we are not following the rules here is completely wrong. I read the ordinance. I know what the ordinance says. I was here when that ordinance, as Mr. Sunday has pointed out, I was here when that ordinance was adopted. And that ordinance very clearly says, the very last section, 5 people get to decide what the procedure will be. And that's what we did tonight. That's been the ordinance for a number of years, and that's what it says. And so we have followed that rule. I will also point out that I have tonight introduced an amendment to that ordinance to eliminate all of those hurdles and eliminate making it extra hard to have a reconsideration. And if 5 people think that no, those hurdles ought to be kept in place, fine. In 2 more meetings, we'll have a chance to make that announcement.
Any other council discussion?
We're following the rules.
Mr. Sunday.
Nobody's pointed out that Ms. Klug's not here tonight. And if we really want to be all-inclusive and let everybody on the council vote, we shouldn't be voting on this tonight. And I think that's why it's supposed to be 2/3, not just a simple majority. And we did an end around on that, is why I really took issue with that. I think it defeats the spirit of that rule, very much so.
Thank you.
That's all.
No other discussion. Please vote on the motion to suspend. I mean, not the motion to suspend, the motion to reconsider.
Five yeas, 2 nays by Sunday and Gaines.
Motion passes, so we're on to the next item, item F6, Resolution R200003, a resolution to grant consent to the resettlement of refugees within the City of Papillion pursuant to Presidential Executive Order number 13888. And again, for the students, that's the item that was on the agenda 2 meetings ago. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200003?
Make a motion to approve resolution number 020-0003.
Motion by Councilman Mumgard. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents? And the proponents and the opponents from the last item, a lot of them bled over to this, so we'll carry those over in the minutes as well. Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Council discussion, Mr. Gaines.
Is it possible to carry over my comments from the last meeting on this same topic?
Sure.
So I don't have
yes.
to, I mean, everybody heard what I had to say.
But we will make sure that all of the comments from the, 2 meetings ago on this specific item will be carried over in the minutes for this one.
Thank you.
Yes.
The other thing that I want to say is that it's my understanding that Sarpy County has suspended their vote on this issue. If some of you don't know, on January 15th, I believe, is a Maryland federal judge has issued a temporary injunction on the Executive Order 13888, and I realize that we're not in a court of law here, but I'm not sure that I think this issue's moot. I don't think there's a reason that we even need to take up the issue today, because right now this executive order does not exist. There's an injunction on it. It may be temporary, as some will argue, but besides the fact that I'm going to vote against it regardless, I would honestly ask the council to consider doing the same thing that Sarpy County did and table this issue until this is resolved in the courts, and we may come to a point where this executive order is struck down by the Supreme Court or a higher level federal judge. But I just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Thank you. Mr. Mumgard.
Well, I guess I would ask for, in respect to the comments made by Councilmember Gaines, I guess I would ask the city attorney if he has any legal advice. Is this matter moot? What's the effect of that injunction?
I don't think it's necessarily moot. The effect of the injunction, first of all, it's a temporary injunction, which means that the lawsuit continues, but just for the time being, the judge is prohibiting the effect of the executive order. So the effect really is on, the effect of that order is really on the settlement agencies who are now able to make their grant applications and proceed down that road that they otherwise would have been precluded without our consent. That having been said, as the injunction is a temporary thing, it's subject to being set aside. The same judge could set it aside. It could be appealed. So there could be some value in taking a stand one way or the other. The council doesn't have to adopt the resolution, but the council can adopt the resolution, and it's not necessarily moot.
As I understand what you're telling us, if we don't adopt a resolution and that temporary injunction goes away, then we're back to where we started at, right? And the only way to have a resolution that approves resettlement is again to start over again with reconsideration or bring it back on the face of it. That we're looking at a situation where, yeah, there's a temporary injunction, but if that goes away, we're back to square one. So I say, is that correct?
If the temporary injunction is reversed or vacated or whatever, then yes, we're back at square one. And if the council is not granted consent, then the resettlement under that executive order doesn't happen. If the council has granted that consent, then that condition in the executive order has been satisfied.
Okay, given that advice and the temporary nature of that injunction, I think it's best that we go forward tonight. We don't need to repeat this over and over and over again. I'll just make my comments here as to why I've asked for reconsideration. Yes, I was absent when this resolution was first before the council, and frankly, I was disappointed that it wasn't adopted then. But, that's what happens when you're not here. So I watched the video of the council meeting, and I saw a couple things that I just want to comment on, and I think we can correct tonight. First, it seemed to me during watching that there was a lack of understanding of the impact of the resolution. And, and I've seen this on local social media in the past month, that lack of understanding is not unique to us. That lack of understanding is in our community too. What does that resolution do or not do? So the resolution that's before us now has in the material that goes along in the public record some important information that answers some of the questions that got asked back in January. And I've now given the city clerk some additional information that I ask be put in the public record. So this information about what the effect of what we're doing tonight is and why we're doing it is in the public record, and it's available now on the website for anyone who's watching. And I hope it makes a difference to people who have questioned the wisdom of adopting this resolution, if that question is based upon a lack of understanding of what we're doing. Okay, then second, at the January meeting, a comment was made, and it has been implied again tonight, that the refugees sponsor, particularly Lutheran Family Services, maybe just in the resettlement business just for the money. Now, I heard that on the video, and I felt that was being unfair to that organization. I've also seen that on social media, so I think that organization deserves a defense. I'm somewhat familiar with Lutheran Family Services, and I don't think it deserves to be disparaged that way, even in a lighthearted way, that it's just in it for the money. So I went and I asked Lutheran Family Services for information to find out, what are you in it for the money or what's going on here? And I'm going to take a moment to discuss that. I am told by them that along with Catholic Social Services, Lutheran Family Services is the primary organization assisting immigrants and refugees in Nebraska. On average, LFS settles 1% of the refugees that are allowed by federal regulations. Now that's about 180 per year. And most of those people join relatives here. And I would point out that some of those refugees are people who have had to leave their country because they helped the United States military fight against their country. And if they stay there, they can be killed. They will be imprisoned. So that's the nature of a refugee. Now, as to the money, the federal government, I'm told, pays, as has been mentioned tonight, Lutheran Family Services and other resettlement agencies roughly around $2,100 per person that gets resettled. I'm told by that agency that $1,000 of that money goes directly to the refugee, who then uses it to buy things in the community. Okay, if we approve this resolution and refugees come to Papillion, they spend money here. We will get the sales tax off of those just like anybody else. Lutheran Family Services then spends the additional $1,100 per person that they receive from the federal government to provide the services that the refugees need to assimilate into our community. These include, they've told me, in the first 90 days, their staff makes 4 home visits to the refugees' residence. They set up the apartment if needed. They make sure that that refugee has housing. They go and they help get the children enrolled in school. They get the refugee enrolled with a Social Security card so that that refugee can go out and get a job and be self-sufficient. And in fact, then it works to get them a job. And in the first 60 days, I'm told, their history is, the first 60 days, 85% of the refugees that are resettled through Lutheran Family Services are employed. That's better than some high school kids who graduate. In 60 days, they have a job. The Lutheran Family Services then provides 2 days of cultural orientation so that the refugees can quickly understand their new culture. And when necessary, it provides behavioral health services to help the adjustment to this new culture. Now, it goes without saying that much of that money, whether people think it's a lot of money or not, much of that money is spent directly in this new community. That would be Papillion. When they're settled here in Papillion, that money is spent here and in the surrounding area. Now, I don't think that the $1,100 that stays with Lutheran Family Services, it's not a lot of money, and I don't think that it realistically leaves a lot of room to make a profit from resettlement. So I can only conclude that by adopting this resolution, we are not as implied on social media, we are not helping some human trafficking criminals get rich. Now, Lutheran Family Services in particular has brochures. You can pick them up. They're available. And in fact, I've asked the mayor to make some of their information available in our 2 library locations. I will just point out that, you know, if we're going to disparage an organization for participating in this process, we should at least look to see why they do it. And they state their mission as such, that they are expressing God's love for all people by providing quality human care services that build and strengthen individual, family, and community life. I'll just sit and close by saying that, well, providing services that build and strengthen individual, family, and community life, as was noted earlier, that sounds like something that a town that brags that it feels like home should support. And by adopting this resolution, we can show that support. So I'm going to vote for it. Thankful to the council for giving me that chance on reconsideration. I'm going to vote for it, and I hope this time our vote can be unanimous.
Mr. Sunday.
I do not believe this motion is motivated by this community's needs, but it's motivated by the needs of another interest group. I did not disparage any organization. I said that there was a financial incentive. Do not misquote me again. I did not say that anybody was just in it for the money. I said they had a financial incentive to bring refugees here, which is a fact. There's no denying that. They get paid per refugee. The UN decides who comes here, not anybody from this government, but the United Nations, which is a left-wing organization, I think is safe to say, that's very hostile to nations like Israel. And those are the people that we want to decide they're going to send to our country. Many of these refugees are from nations that are hostile to our country, hostile to our religion, our predominant religions of Christianity and Judaism. And they're asking us to accept not just our fair share of refugees, but over the past decade, the United States of America has taken well over its fair share. The lion's share of refugees around the world have come right here. And it's time for the rest of the world to start shouldering some of that burden as well. It isn't a free lunch to just bring somebody here and everything's going to be hunky-dory. They have to assimilate to our culture, which is not an easy thing to do. It's expensive, and many of these folks are going to end up on welfare and other government assistance. There's no debating that. It's a fact. So I also noted that when Ms. Renante listed off those organizations, I think 9 or 10 organizations, almost every one of those is a left-leaning organization. So we have a left-leaning United Nations and left-leaning organizations that are making these decisions. And I think somebody's got to stand up and say enough is enough. So I am. That's all I have.
Mr. Ingberg. Nope, your mic went off. Okay, now.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. I did reply to Ms. Rianetti, sent me an email and tried to provide some information that I gathered because I don't like to make decisions without information. But let me say this. You know, I tend to be a fairly conservative guy in most every issue that comes before us. But there's a couple things I think we're missing here. First of all, I had a few questions when we first were presented some of the material. My first question was, does this make Papillion a sanctuary city? That was a concern of mine. I'll be upfront about it because I think you have very little control if you become a sanctuary city. This executive order from President Trump does not do that. This is a resettlement for refugees. So that kind of changed my opinion against it. Second of all, the other thing that I think is interesting to point out is today, without this resolution today, any refugee that wants to can move into Papillion, live where they want to, do what they want to, basically within our laws, but we wouldn't have no idea they were here. No idea. No reason to know they were here. 10 refugees can move in tomorrow. Perfectly legal. We wouldn't know. What this resolution does, and I'm not saying the federal government does a great job at this, but every refugee that wants to locate in Papillion, Nebraska has to pass through 4 steps of vetting. And I'm not going to go through the process because there's, I don't know, I counted them, but there's a whole page full list of vetting they have to process through. The other thing they're required to do, if they're going to live in Papillion, Nebraska, is the city's made aware of it. They're made aware of the circumstance, who they're living with, and usually, if they want any benefit provided by the resolution, they really are required to live with family. It's not a case of an open borders kind of situation. It's designed to, A, let local governments know who's in their community, B, provide some incentive that if they're going to be in your community, they have the ability to live with family. And in order to do that, if they want any kind of assistance in housing or those kinds of financial assistance or program assistance, I'll let the administration who looked into this tell me if I'm wrong, but in order to obtain any of that, they must live with family. If I'm correct, or they have, preferably they have to live with family in order to receive some of that. But even if that's not the case, the point is there's not any real change other than the fact that we'll know they're here. We'll know what their situation is. We'll know if they need help acclimating to the culture. And considering there's very few refugees at this point that move into Nebraska, not alone Papillion, I don't see a big influx of refugees just showing up here because, quite honestly, most of them that come to Papillion are here to move in with family. Will it cost us any money? I suppose if you put somebody in school, there's going to be a cost. On the other hand, because of the help of the Catholic Services and Lutheran Family Services, the goal is to help them get employed and assimilate, which means they start paying taxes, which means they start paying the freight if there is some cost. So to me, this isn't a matter of, and to all due respect to Mr. Sunday, he knows I respect his opinion. He knows that. But to me, this really is one case on a local level where it's not about a left wing or right wing. What's about is people thing. It's a people thing. And I think we have the ability in Papillion to absorb what small amount of refugees may come here to live with family or come here to enjoy what we all enjoy. And I think it's not a matter of right or left. It's a matter of, are we compassionate enough to allow people to live here and know that they're here so we can provide the help if they need it and know who they are and know they've been vetted and not just show up here and we know nothing about it. Thank you.
Mr. Jaworski.
Mr. Ingberg pretty much said what I was going to say. I do believe this is an important resolution because we do know they're coming. Without it, we don't know, and they still can come with this or without it. So I think it's very important. And also, La Vista, if I'm wrong, and they've already passed it, am I right? So, and they are our neighbors. So, what's good if we turn this down? What's going to stop them from walking over? I mean, you just walk over a block and you're in Papillion. So, to me, I think this is important. because we kind of have an eye on what's going on. So I think I'm supporting it. So thank you.
Mr. Gaines.
So this is mostly for, well, I want to get some clarification because I keep hearing repeatedly, if we approve this, we know they're here. If we don't approve it, they can come here anyways. So the reality of the statement is this. If we do not approve this, they cannot be directly resettled here. But they can resettle here. Okay? If we don't approve this, they cannot be, or if we approve this, they can be resettled here, but they can still come from other communities here anyways. This doesn't give us any additional security by knowing they're here. We're just authorizing them coming here. And they can still go somewhere, be resettled initially somewhere else, and come here, and we still don't know they're here. The only thing this does is allow us to resettle them here and know that they were resettled here. Changes nothing else. So that is my understanding of it. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But
And I believe that was discussed at the 2 council meetings ago, and I believe Chief validated that. Is that
correct? So I just want to make sure that people aren't selling this as, well, if we vote for this, we know they're here. No, if we vote for this, we're allowing them to come here, and more can still come here, and we don't know they're here just as they can today. If we vote against this, they cannot be initially settled here. Therefore, we wouldn't know that nothing really changes except we're authorizing them being initially settled here. There's no further notification.
Mr. Ingberg.
I have a question for Amber Powers, Assistant City Administrator, because I know she's answered some questions I've had. Is it true or not that if a person is resettled by the State Department, let's say in La Vista, for example, if they move to Papillion, do they not have to notify the State Department of that move?
That is correct. They would have to notify the State Department. We would not receive notification for the city of Papillion.
But are they not required to notify the city of Papillion as well?
They would not be. No, they would lose if, let's say, they were resettled in La Vista and we did not consent to resettlement here. Like if the motion failed tonight, they could settle somewhere like La Vista, and then they could move here. They would lose any funding that they were getting, any state or federal dollars that they were getting, but they could still move here. And the reason Papillion was chosen as one of the cities to consider this is because we have been identified that there are refugees in other countries that have immediate family that lives here. And immediate would be spouse, parent, child, not like a distant relative or anything, but immediate family. So that's one point, is that they would, if they're in La Vista, they most likely would want to move to where their immediate family is.
Yeah, so if somebody is placed in La Vista, resettled there, since they've passed it, Bellevue's passed it, for example, the State Department would go through the vetting procedure and everything. After they live in La Vista, if they say, hey, I like the looks of Papillion and want to move to Papillion, the State Department would know they moved, because they no longer would lose the incentive to stay in La Vista, because they would lose the funding, which is a big incentive to remain there. But if they decide to throw away that incentive and any assistance they might receive by moving here, they still could anyway.
That is correct, and they're still tracked by the State Department. So State Department would still know where they are. They're not just running rampant throughout, the U.S. or whatever. They still are tracked by the state. We just wouldn't, or State Department. We just don't receive notice in Papillion.
Thank you.
Any other council discussion? If not, please vote.
Five yeas, 2 nays by Sunday and Gaines.
Motion passes. Next is item F7, Resolution R200019, a resolution to approve the installation of no parking signs at several locations. This also was discussed at the prior meeting. It was tabled in order to give more notification to the affected residents, and that has been made. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200019? Motion by Councilman Gaines. Second by Councilman Stube. Mr. Mumgarde, did you have a motion to
Yes,
amend?
I'll make a substitute motion to approve the resolution, but first take out North Adams Street location out of the resolution.
I'm just going to have that as a motion to amend to remove.
Yes.
I think same thing.
I didn't say it very well. It's a motion to amend the resolution to remove that North Adams Street location from the resolution. I would prefer to, I would prefer to handle that separately. A resident has suggested that a one-way change could solve the problem. I think we should take some time to at least examine that.
Yep.
So,
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Stube. Council discussion, Mr. Ingberg.
Do we need to vote on this before I make a substitute to his substitute?
Is yours going to be to remove another location or to do
No.
something else?
A different action.
Just so there's clarity, let's go ahead and act on this one, and then we'll take the action on the amended.
But with that, well, look, could I do this? May I tell you, explain what that motion would be? Perhaps Mr. Mumgarde would then withdraw his motion. Because the reason we tabled it last time was we wanted to make notice to the citizens. I know there's a large group here today. And since that time, since they were notified, a lot of us have received feedback from people, whether they're in favor or not in favor of it. And because the whole purpose was to get information from the citizens, now that we have it, I would make a suggestion we table it again. And I would go so far as suggest that it goes back to the Safety Committee to consider all the feedback from the citizens. If nothing changes, fine. If Mr. Mumgarde at that point, if nothing changes, wants to pull that out, that's fine with me as well. I just want to make sure we listen to the citizens and bring it back and perhaps have the Safety Committee, I think Mr. Gaines, the chairman, perhaps just go through their comments, have some discussion, and recommend back to us.
Eugene, you okay with that approach?
can we have the public hearing tonight and
Because people are here, I think that's appropriate.
withdraw my substitute motion and go with Mr. Ingberg's motion?
Well, if you withdraw, and I'm assuming that's okay from the second, we'll go ahead and call for the original motion is on the floor, and to respect the people that are here, we'll go ahead and call for proponents and opponents so we can hear that dialogue, and then we'll take the motion to table, if that works. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. It's the original motion that's on the floor. Do you have any proponents, those that want to speak in favor? Yes. And if you just come up to the podium and state your name for the record. Thanks for your patience tonight. This has been a good education for students tonight.
I don't know if after what was all going on before that, if I want to get up here or not. Anyway, my name is John Worthman. I'm on a corner of Gunther and Madison, and that's where the school is. And I want to, I very seldom come up and say, okay, I'm for it, but I am for that. There's renters on the other side of the street. Sometimes there's 5 and 6 cars on that street. And when it's 8:10 in the morning and 3:10 in the afternoon, there's heavy traffic. It looks like a funeral procession that's speeding up through there. And if you're coming down to your home, the other people are passing the cars that are there, and they're coming right head on at you. And it's very dangerous there. And I think for the people that have to pick their kids up, I sympathize with them because they're in a hurry and they want to get things done. Same problem at the bottom of the hill. It's bad news there, and I think we need to do something. I've got a second item though. There's heavy traffic from the contractor that lives west of me, and we're getting big earth movers going down my street. And I've got pictures that I brought with me, and I'll be glad to show them to you.
I want to be a little careful because we can only talk about things we've actually published on the agenda to the public,
I
and
understand.
that one moves a little bit. But I want
when I was talking to the fellow that sent the letter.
But I want to let you know we are having an active discussion about truck routes in the city and what appropriate places are for trucks.
Yeah.
We will take a note and keep you informed on that discussion because I think where you're going fits that directly.
Okay, very good. That's what the letter after I talk.
Mr. Worthman?
Yes.
Right here. I'd be happy to speak with you after the meeting and let you know
Great,
where
Steve.
we are. You bet.
Okay, thank you very much.
So you are a proponent on what's being proposed for the Grunther and
That's
Madison?
on, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Anybody who wants to speak in favor? Are there any opponents? If you just go ahead and, you can go ahead and just start lining up and come up one at a time. And if you'd state your name for the record and then give us the specific intersection that you're talking about, so we have that.
I am a proponent. My name is Rebecca Stock again. This is what I came here for. The particular it's not an intersection, it's the corner of Cedarwood and Juniper Drive. I am for it, but I would amend it. We need the site clearance around the corner, specifically at 802 Juniper Drive. But that is one house length along Cedarwood and one house length along Juniper. We really don't need it to go a second house length along Juniper, as it is written now. And I know that my neighbor across the street agrees with me.
Thank you. Anybody else in favor? Yes.
Hi, I'm Kara Stover Kolojejok, and that's my neighbor back there. Same thing, I agree with what she said from 802. That's the only thing that needs to be covered. That's like right in front of our house as well. Because otherwise, if you take that whole other section of house, there won't be any parking, and that section doesn't obstruct the visual sight line. It's merely from their drive to the end. So I feel like that would be the best for everyone in that particular area and safety-wise.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Yes.
My name is Pete Dusky. I'm at 301 Fall Creek Road, and this is in reference to the traffic signs from 301 Fall Creek Road to 2123 Dana Lane. We received notification about this proposal a week ago yesterday, and so we were a little bit surprised by it and hadn't been at previous meetings to talk about this. So I just wanted to make a couple points. There's several of my neighbors that are here with me, and if I don't cover their points, I'm sure they'll come up and fill in where I missed out. And I don't know if it's appropriate, but I also have letters from 10 of the neighbors that weren't able to come here tonight, and I've got copies for the city council if they'd like.
When you're done, if you can give those to us, we'll make sure those get into the record.
Okay. Okay, so some of my points, and hopefully you'll bear with me on this.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
I'll talk as fast as I can.
No, you go ahead.
We've got many of us that have been there for 22, 23 years. Collectively, we've raised about 22 kids at that intersection, and particularly those 4 or 5 houses. We, of all people, would have been the first people to come to the city council and complain over those 23 years, and yet we haven't complained over those 23 years. At the current time, my next door neighbors, they have 2 of the younger kids in that location, and my chief concern would be for their safety. And if you remove the parking there, it would embolden the people that already speed through that area to go faster, further endangering their kids. During those 23 years that I've been there, there's never been an accident at that location. I, as a driver, have never had a problem navigating through that intersection. And although I'd like to speak for all my neighbors, all the people I talk to generally have agreed with that, darn near 100%. Without belaboring it, 23 years and 365 days a year, that's 8,395 days without an accident. And collectively, if you do it by the 2 individuals that live at each house, that's over 100,000 days collectively that we as adults have not observed any accidents or seen that intersection as a safety concern. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for the folks that had complained, did they identify when they were having difficulty at that intersection, whether it was specific to any specific months of the year? Is this a case of people trying to get to Rumsey Station with their kids, and it's Monday through Friday and only during the school? We don't know. Is there a certain time of the day that this is a problem? I've navigated through that intersection, like I said, through 23 years, and other than using just prudent, normal driver safety concerns, I haven't had any problems. Hopefully people remember what they've learned, in driver's training, but one of the things was never travel faster than your sight line. So if it's foggy out and you can only see so far, you slow down. Translate that into a neighborhood, and even though it's 25 through there are people that, and I'm sure this happens in all neighborhoods, they go faster than that. Hopefully it's because they can see better than that, but I guess kind of side the point. One of the things is that I consider is what stopping distance is. If you're traveling 25 miles an hour, stopping distance, and I've looked this up online, is 60 feet. If you've got two people coming from different directions, you double that. It's 120 feet. And I believe if you've done any type of traffic study or anything, you could take a string and put it right at the driver's side window for the lane and run that thing out where all these cars are parked, and you will not lose 120 feet of sight distance. Now, wouldn't it be better if we had more than 120 feet? Yeah. But there is that type of sight distance if a person's traveling at 25 miles an hour. Okay, so what am I seeing? Where are these complaints coming from? Well, it's got to be through somebody that's not paying attention. They're driving faster than 25 miles an hour. They're not observing typical courtesy rules that should be observed by everybody driving through a residential area. And if it's happening during the time when people are getting kids to school, it's even more terrible because there's a more likelihood that there'd be kids in the neighborhood that could be in and out of traffic or crossing the street. So having said that, and I have universal agreement with my neighbors on this, and I'll give you those letters later. If a person is observing, if the signs are removed, it's only going to increase the speed and the amount of speeding in that area, and it's not going to be an improvement in safety at all. The other thing I did is I looked at the map of the neighborhood and was trying to figure if it's not people that just live up and down Fall Creek Road and Dana Lane, if it is potentially a group of people that are coming from Eagle Hills, because Lee Lane is the only route to come from Eagle Hills to get into Eagle Ridge and to get to Rumsey Station. There is an alternative route. Instead of going to Fall Creek Road and hanging a left, if they took a left on Castle Pine is a wider street. And then from Castle Pine to, I thought it was Franklin, and it might be Franklin. You could probably see it on a map. It's a straight shot without any sight or perceived sightline restrictions all the way to Eagle Ridge Drive. And it's actually one less stop sign. So I don't know if you're like me, but when the weather's bad, I don't take Kennedy Freeway because I know it's going to be a problem. If a person knows that there's a situation that they're not happy with in terms of a driving situation and there's other alternatives that they can take, that's not the only other alternative in terms of driving. But for me, it's the best alternative. There are other alternatives there rather than taking away parking that, in my estimation, it's not blocked there very often. I think this entire week I've only seen 2 cars parked along that stretch any given day. So the thing that also strikes me is around holidays or graduations or things like that, people naturally have a lot of people visiting. But for me and my family, it means that I have to send my family, my 80-year-old mom, my stepmom, they're going to have to, either we're going to have to drop them off in front of our house or we're going to have to park a couple blocks away if that parking is available, because other folks do also have folks visiting them. So it seems to me that the inconvenience of a few people that have been the proponents of removing these parking signs, their minimal amount of inconvenience, maybe taking their kids to school for a few days. If they happen to have some traffic coming in the other direction, it's a minimal inconvenience, but for those of us that would be impacted by that parking, it would pretty much be a daily inconvenience for us. Thank you.
Do you have those letters with you?
Yes, I do.
Can you give them to Ms. Brown? And we'll make sure they get into the record. Any other opponents? Hi.
My name is Nicola Knudsen, and I live at 205 Fall Creek Road. I'm Pete's neighbor, right next door. I've lived in that house for about 15 years. We live right at the corner of that curve that people have their concern about. At the end of my property line, I guess, is a stop sign, and then the curve comes right out in front of our house. The biggest problem that I've seen since I've lived there is nobody stops at that stop sign. And so you have the cars coming from the curve, around the curve, and you've got people that are supposed to be stopped at the stop sign. But we sit and watch all summer long. We sit outside and talk with our neighbors and visit, and we watch car after car after car, like barely hesitate at that stop sign and go. They don't consider cars coming up from Dana Lane, and it is kind of a weird curve there. And if people would stop at the stop sign and slow down through the curve, then there wouldn't be a problem. The no parking signs, that would mean for me, because that would be right in front of my house. I would have to, a few houses down this way and a few houses down this way if I have company. And, I've got kids that have cars, and, you've got to shuffle them around to get in and out of your driveway. And parking on the street sometimes is very helpful. But those no parking signs would put, my young daughter and her son, a couple of houses away and having to lug, or my parents when they come to visit. It's just really not convenient. If people would really take their time and stop at the stop sign and slow down when they make that curve, come around that curve, there wouldn't be an issue. I would really love to have a police officer come, and they can sit in my driveway in an unmarked car and just watch and observe, and they'll see the same thing because nobody stops at that stop sign. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other opponents?
My name's Mike Kerfrey. I live on that intersection too. Well, one thing about the Knutsens, they do pull their vehicles off the street if they know it's going to snow for the snow truck or the plow truck. So people run that stop sign left and right, but even with all these people running the stop sign, there still has never been an accident there. So that's all I got to say. I agree with everything they've said.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Nutt. I'll be speaking on behalf of Adams Street. My mother is actually the constituent Councilman Mumgard was speaking of. So I was born and raised in that house on Adams Street. It's the same house that my father was born and raised and still lives in today. It's a pretty common parking spot for him and my brother as well. And so I can definitely see how the crest of the hill at 5th and Adams Streets can be hazardous to drivers, regardless of whether there's vehicles parked there or weather conditions as well. As the city's grown over the years, my neighbors and I have seen drastic increases to the volume of motorists utilizing our street, especially with the development of Home Depot in the area as well. One thing that has come with that is the issue of people speeding. So in my early teens, it was a little embarrassing to hear my passionate mother yell at drivers to slow down as they blazed through our streets, sometimes going up to 45 miles an hour easily. By my 20s, she was no longer the only one yelling at people. My parents and neighbors have spoken out, trying to find solutions to this issues for years, since I was really little. So kind of perspective, for about 25 years or so. We've had good neighbors move to quieter neighborhoods just to keep their children safe. As now, the neighborhood is home to many young families that are looking to grow, as well as established families that have grandchildren and great-grandchildren that come to visit on weekends, holidays, and other events. As well with that, during Papillion days, North Adams Street is easily one of the more popular roads for citizens to park, as we're just up the hill from the festivities. Eliminating street parking only alleviates one of the safety concerns, but it allows others to develop. A number of the driveways do have difficulty seeing northbound traffic coming up the hill. For example, when I was in high school, my older sister was hit backing out of the driveway due to somebody speeding, and she could not see them. Personally, I have not been hit, but I do deal with a number of tailgaters as I'm trying to get in and out of my parents' driveway. So while it is a public road, motorists should not be treating it as if it was a main thoroughfare, such as 72nd Street. With many families having children of various ages come to live and visit in the neighborhood, speeding drivers do create potential tragic possibilities. There's no denying that there is a risk with vehicles parked at or near the crest of the hill, but it should not overshadow the other risks that it pose to the residents there as well. A couple ideas that I've heard discussed about this are radar signs on the street to help diminish some of the speeding, blind driveway signs, or my mother's suggestion of the one-way southbound designation for the street. If there's the potential for compromise between these, potentially having no parking during high traffic hours, such as 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. as well. So it's really just my point to say, give this more discussion as opposed to just putting this parking signs up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the, I'll call, well, we didn't have a public hearing, just proponents and opponents. Council discussion, Mr. Ingberg.
Just to reiterate, I'd like to table this so there could be a little more digestion of what we heard tonight. And obviously, just point out the obvious, whether it goes to the safety committee or not is entirely up to Mayor Black because he decides that. I will ask that if the mayor decides to do that, I'd make a request, if it's not too big a request, of Councilman Gaines, who's the chairman of the safety committee. The maps we got tonight are great, but I've heard from a couple other council people, it'd be great if somehow they could highlight what area the no parking would actually be. It makes it a lot easier if you want to go drive it, or, you know what I'm saying, instead of just having a legal description or the corner of, if you indicate, if you could have someone indicate that, that'd be great.
Mr. Stubbe.
Yeah, if Mr. Ingberg is going to make a motion to table this, I would support that. There's a lot of signs on here. Normally, we don't get a whole lot of the requests to put up no parking signs. So it's not as a member of the Public Safety Committee, I'd like a little bit more information. I understand based on the information we have in front of us is that there were evaluations done from the standpoint of sight distance. I don't want to get into a situation where if citizens don't want a no parking sign there, they can just call us and say, hey, there's an issue and we're going to put up a no parking sign. I like to have a little bit more evaluation. Obviously, Mr. Thielen knows that we have a manual that is a guidance document for us within the state of Nebraska. We should really be looking at that. I asked Jeff from the standpoint, some of the citizens indicated no accidents at that location. Are we looking at accident histories at those locations? Obviously, we can't have a police officer sit out there all the time. I'm a little bit concerned about the gentleman that talked about Adams Street. Some of his comments almost indicated to me it warranted putting a no parking sign there if we've got people that are speeding on that particular locations. So I've got a lot of questions. I think it would be appropriate, and I would suggest and recommend and support having it go back to the Public Safety Committee and taking another look at it.
Do you have a formal motion?
Yes, I'd make a motion this be tabled until the appropriate council meeting, and that would ask the staff or the mayor, I guess specifically, to consider possibly referring it back to the safety committee for review.
So we have a motion for an indefinite date with a referral to public safety, second by Mr. Stubbe. Any council discussion on the motion to table? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next, the rest of the meeting should go quick. Item F8, Resolution R200029, a resolution to approve the First Amendment to the Schramm and Highway 50 subdivision agreement. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200029? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Glover. Do we have any proponents? Any opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Item F9, Resolution R200030, a resolution to accept dedications of street right-of-way for 2 tracts of Gold Coast Road and Cooper Street right-of-way with tax lot 10, 351411, and lot 1, Schramm and Highway 50. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R200030? Motion by Councilman Stubbe, second by Councilman Mumgard. Do we have any proponents? Opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
It's all the regular agenda items. We've had 2 committees meet. Public Works, a report from that.
We did not have a legal meeting tonight, so I'm assuming it's going to be postponed and rescheduled at some point in time.
Yep.
As far as the Public Safety Committee, we did meet tonight, and we took up several different issues. We continued discussing the Washington Street pedestrian safety issue, trying to transform that, like we've been talking, into what the vision of downtown's going to be, trying to control traffic, things like that. We did recommend to city staff we had several different options that the staff had come back to us with, and we looked over those options, and we did vote to recommend one of the options. Some of the components of it is maintaining the existing cross section along Washington Street, however, narrow all the lanes slightly to 11 feet to try to slow the traffic a little bit. Install a high-intensity activated crosswalk, which is also referred to as a hawk signal at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and Washington Street. To reduce the site obstructions, relocating the bench and the garbage can on the southeast and southwest corners at the intersections of 2nd Street and Washington. And then installing some post-mounted speed display signs in a few locations. Making a few changes to some turning signs, installing some flashing yellow signals. And basically, we instructed the city staff to go out and get some costs on this and some time frames, and then we'll take it back up and see if we recommend it to the full council. The second item on the agenda that we had tonight was changing an ordinance in regards to mobile food vendors. The city staff did come to us with a proposed ordinance, and probably the most major changes is that with the street being narrowed a little bit, the lanes being narrowed, the new ordinance would restrict mobile food vendors within the Washington Street right-of-way between 1st and 2nd Street, except pursuant to a temporary permit issued by the city during times in which the road is closed. The second thing on that mobile food truck proposed order was basically making sure that if there were food trucks, that they had to serve food on the sidewalk side of the vehicle and not on the street side of the vehicle. The third item that we took up tonight, which I believe somebody in the audience mentioned, was having an ordinance to actually have approved truck routes. Some of the old truck routes that we had, the maps were 30 plus years old. The city did provide us with an ordinance, and we recommended that it goes to the council for consideration, basically making an official truck route map for the city of Papillion, and the new ordinance would be more enforceable than what we currently had in place. So
That's relevant to the conversation the gentleman raised. Can you
Correct.
meet with him afterwards and fill him in? I think Mr. Sunday, you mentioned that, because you're on that committee, right? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Both the food truck ordinance and the truck route ordinance, we did recommend to come to the council. So
Thank
that's
you.
the end of my report.
Mr. Ingberg.
I just want to ask a couple questions of Mr. Gaines. First of all, with the food trucks, did anyone, whether it's committee or staff, have any contact with Twisted Vine at all? Do you know about that? Because I know there's usually one down by there.
I'm not sure if they have any contact with Twisted Vine or not. We basically did it as we're narrowing the lanes. There's the discussion came up with the big trucks that park down there, that they're starting to impede traffic, and as we narrow the lanes, we feel like they're going to stick out even further, but I don't know that anybody from the city can contact them.
Since there was a meeting tonight that's making a recommendation, one of the things we'll do is make sure that the Downtown Business Association Board is aware. And Twisted Divine is a member of that association. That way they can represent all of the membership down there and get the word out.
I don't, if I may, it will come as a surprise to Twisted Vine because I think some of their business neighbors have already complained. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we did keep people informed in the downtown business area, so all of a sudden it's not a surprise. My second question is, when you say narrow the lanes, are we talking about bump outs or something else?
Probably better to ask Mr. Stern or
The proposal by our consultant FHU was to just restripe the current lane configuration exclusive of bump outs or any additional curb work.
Is there still any discussion or consideration about bump outs, like say at 3rd and 84th Street and a couple other locations we discussed previously?
Those were part of the option packages that were submitted to the committee. They weren't part of the overall recommendation, but they were part of the option package, but not what was recommended for staff to pursue any further.
And we'll make sure that the information that went to Public Safety Committee is available for the other council members.
Okay, yeah, I'm really curious about that because when we added the bump outs down at 1st and 2nd Street, that dramatically slowed traffic without narrowing the lanes at all. But the perception is the lanes are narrower, so people slow down. So I'm a little disappointed we didn't go that direction. And I'd also ask that if we do end up putting a lot of signs down there, that we at least make them match it be not the steel post rammed into the ground kind of signage that we use, the more stylish, you want to use the words, that match the other signs we have down there.
Mr. Gaines.
Hey, just to answer your concern, is that this is the first step. The other, we sat through and we evaluated each plan, and this was the plan that had the least effect on downtown at the lowest amount of cost, and then we can do this immediately or relatively soon, and then take into consideration, like you were talking about, bump outs or change it in traffic patterns, things like that. That is still on the table. This is just the first step to see how this works. So,
Mr. Sunday.
I was just going to follow up on that point. I did specifically ask that question in the meeting. If this isn't working out 2 to 3 years down the road, can we come back and use some of these other ideas? And he said certainly that wouldn't be precluded. So,
Mr. Stubbe.
Yeah, if you're pricing things out, I guess I'm curious also as far as the point from point A to point B with regard to the restriping. Is that go all the way up to 6th Street or where
6th Street to Halleck.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Any other, so that's the two committees. Comments from the floor. I know we've got some students here. You got to come up and introduce yourself and we will wait. And again, your name and what brings you here.
I'm McKenna Caffa, and I come from Papillion South from Mr. Brannigan's government.
Tell him that you get extra credit tonight because the meeting went a lot longer than normal, and we talked about a lot of things that most people don't get to hear.
Okay.
And if he doesn't give you extra credit, tell him to call me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other students? All right, thank you. Any other comments from the floor? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. City Council members, thank you. My name is Ted Stapleton. I represent American Legion Post 32 in downtown Papillion. This year, the American Legion turns 101 years old, and we're going to have a birthday party to celebrate. The American Legion Post 32 family is hosting an open house birthday party Sunday, March 15th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Please put it on your calendars. We'd love to see you all there. Any questions?
March 15th?
March 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Any other comments from the floor? Yes, sir.
I don't have copies for everybody, but I have another letter.
Okay, thank you. Any council comments? See no comments, just a couple things from the last couple of weeks. Legislature's in session, they're in a short session, so we're meeting almost every week as the United Cities. Again, for students, we have a formal organization between the 5 cities in Sarpy County, and the mayors and the administrators get together every single month and talk about items that we have in common, and usually it's things that's going on at the legislature. And so we had that meeting, then we had a conference call as well. If you're not aware, and this does not directly impact Papillion, so I want to be careful with what we say because people might think it does, but Major League Baseball is looking at reorganizing minor league baseball nationwide. And in that reorganization, they might cut up to 40 teams go away. And they may actually disassociate with minor league baseball. All indications are storm chasers are not affected by that. But obviously, if minor league baseball is concerned, we're a little concerned about that. So mayors around the nation have created a task force. And so far, there's 100 mayors representing the towns of the minor league teams. And I did join that on Papillion's behalf. We've written some letters. So if you hear anything in regards to Major League, minor league baseball, you get questions from citizens of what's going on as the storm chasers leaving. No, it's more me supporting what's going on nationally. And we did have a conference call on that this week. But if people see that, they might wonder, oh, the storm chasers are going away. No, they're not. Just supporting our friends around the nation. The wastewater agency had a board meeting. We got some good discussions going on there, looking at the approaches, and I'm hoping maybe in the next month or so we'll have some good direction, and we'll be briefing council on where that direction is going. The 2020 census is coming up as well. It's pretty important for Sarpy County, so we're going to be taking an active role in communications of encouraging people to participate in the census. So if you can encourage that, that'd be great. Been out talking to third graders at some of the schools. I think a number of council were at the Lions Club Spaghetti Feed and the Pac Band concert. A great event. That was the first official Papillion 150 event, and the Pac Band actually had some music commissioned for the 150, and they're doing a series of 3 concerts focusing on the first 50 years of Papillion, the second 50 years, and then the third 50 years. So they're really rallying behind that. We've had a number of ribbon cuttings, and also went out and took a tour of the Omaha Box Company, Liberty Packaging. That's about a 250,000 square foot facility that relocated to Papillion. It's a 4th generation business that had been in Omaha, and they purposely relocated to Papillion, and they specifically reached out to meet with their senior leadership because they made that statement, Papillion's our home. We want to learn about Papillion, its history, and how do we get involved. So that was really nice to hear from them. And then we've had several different ribbon cuttings, and we had the Chamber of Commerce out at Papillion Landing to show that and let them see how they can start leveraging it. Reminder, we got a Public Facilities Committee meeting on the 18th and City Council the same night. Any other council discussion? Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Glover, second by Councilman Gaines. Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
We are adjourned. Thank you.